E aí, pessoas? Tudo bem com vocês? Oi, pessoas. Gente, eu descobri ontem que era transmitido ao vivo pro YouTube. Eu fui mega grosseira, eu não sabia. Oi, pessoas do YouTube que estão assistindo em casa. Palmas para a pessoa que está em casa. Isso aí. Adoro. Gente, eu sei que vocês estão mega empolgados, eu também. Eu vou só dar algumas regrinhas aqui para vocês, que é super básico, tá? A primeira regra é... Antes da regra, eu estou muito feliz de estar aqui, eu estou muito feliz de estar vendo isso aqui lotado, gente. Bienal, obrigada por vocês estarem aqui, por vocês lerem romance. Rapazes que estão aqui, leiam romance, tá? Por favor, não é só coisa de moças, tá? Todo mundo, pessoas. Uma coisa que eu queria muito falar para vocês é o seguinte, a gente tem uma coisa muito legal que vai rolar nesse painel, e que a Julia não sabe. E aí vocês vão fazer parte disso, tá? Mas é mais tarde. Eu vou dar a dica. 2 regras. Uma regra é... A gente vai fazer todas as perguntas em português. Eu vou fazer as perguntas em português para a galera lá da tradução não me matar. Eles estão lá assim, obrigado! E aí eu vou pedir para vocês fazerem perguntas também, que eu acho que o pessoal tem pedacinho de papel para fazer pergunta. Então, pode escrever em português as perguntas, tá? Que a gente vai fazer aqui a triagem para poder fazer pergunta para ela. Segunda coisa, pedido não é pergunta. Então, não vale o tipo, Júlia, eu não consegui, autografa meu livro. Júlia, eu quero te levar para casa. Júlia, consegue tirar essa pessoa aqui do livro, coloca eu como par dessa pessoa. Eu tentei, não deu certo. Então, tá? Então, pedido não é pergunta, façam perguntas mesmo. E a última regra é assim, todo mundo já leu tudo que é livro dela, né, gente? Sim. Então, assim, eu não preciso meio que me preocupar com spoilers, né? Todo mundo sabe que termina todo mundo bem, feliz e contente. No jardim, no cantinho da biblioteca, na carruagem. Estamos esperando. Mas só para vocês terem isso em mente, tá? Sem mais delongas, pessoas. Celulares a postos. É ela, a autora de tantos personagens que fazem o nosso coração suspirar. Julia Quinn, gente! I stole your microphone. Esse tá ligado também? Tá. Excelente. É que a gente trocou de lado, gente, porque eu tenho que ficar aqui de lado. Okay, you want to say hi to everyone? Hi! Bom, vamos começar, que a gente tem muita coisa para montar aqui, né, para falar. Você veio ao Brasil algumas vezes. Is that okay? Can you hear it? Fine? Okay. Você veio ao Brasil algumas vezes, mas essa é a primeira vez que volta depois da estreia da adaptação de Bridgertons para a Netflix. Como era estar de volta, ainda mais depois de um grande baile ontem?
It's amazing. I love coming to Brazil. Even before the show, the readers and the fans here are just the best. You're so warm, you're so excited. It's incredible.
Gente, maravilhosa, pessoas. Tá tudo direitinho, tá chegando para vocês o som direitinho, tá tudo ok? A gente tem que checar que tá ótimo, excelente. Vamos lá. Tem alguém chorando aqui do lado? Eu ouvi. Eu estou chorando. Adoro. Somos amigas. Também, amiga, estou aqui. Você publicou mais de 30 livros e uma das suas obras mais famosas foi adaptada para a Netflix, com 2 temporadas e a 3ª vindo aí. A gente está tentando, galera. Estamos tentando arrancar tudo aqui. Como foi esse processo?
The smartest thing I ever did was tell the people at Shondaland that they could have creative control and that they could do. Hold on a second. It's just.
A lot of voices in the
Yeah. Well, it works really well when I'm getting the English. So the smartest thing I was able to do was to tell the people at Shondaland, you know what you're doing. You make a great show. I'm not going to tell Shonda Rhimes how to make television. She knows what she's doing. So I've actually been very hands-off with the process.
E ela que buscou, né, os livros. Ela era apaixonada por Bridgerton e ela é uma leitora, assim como nós, né, Julia?
Yeah, so what happened was Shonda's a big reader, and she always takes books with her on vacation. And for some reason, she ran out of books this one time, and I think she was in London, actually, so that's kind of extra cool. And somehow she picked up one of my books, and that's how lucky I am.
Oh my God. Gente, tá vendo? Quando a gente fica assim, não pode ficar sem livro nas férias. E aí, quando fica sem livro nas férias, eu gostei desse aqui, acho que eu vou transformar isso numa série. Queremos ser amigos de Shonda, né? Adoro. Temos várias dicas para Shonda também. Do tipo, libera a 3ª temporada, Shonda. Vamos lá. Excelente. Por falar em 3ª temporada... Eu juro que eu tento. Alguma novidade de quando a gente vai saber da 3ª temporada? A gente pode esperar uma 4ª temporada, sabe? Conta aí pra gente alguma coisa, Julia. Tell us anything.
Are they getting what I'm saying through you or through her?
They're getting both.
Okay. So I don't know. I'm sorry, and I have to be honest. If I did know, I couldn't tell you. But I honestly don't know when the 3rd season is coming. And I can't give you any spoilers. I have read the scripts, and it's amazing. But you guys don't know how much trouble I would get into if I told you anything. And Netflix would just be like, we're not going to show you anything. So sorry.
Eu vou tentar mais uma coisa, tá, gente? A gente, assim, tivemos um evento da Netflix há pouco tempo aqui, e a Nicola veio, né? E aí ela disse, assim, algumas coisas, tipo, que tiveram cenas interessantes, filmadas, que quebraram até uma peça de mobília, né, durante essa cena. Palavras dela, não é fanfic minha, gente, aconteceu. Eu tô aqui assim, mentira, isso é verdade se eu vir, né? Tipo, me prova. Mas assim, a gente pode esperar assim muito pólen nessa próxima temporada?
If Nicholas said it, it must be true.
Pronto, gente, então é verdade, é isso aí. Mobília quebrada, estamos aqui para isso. Falando ainda sobre Netflix, mas agora Rainha Charlotte, deusa maravilhosa, Barbie rainha. Ela foi baseada numa personagem histórica e dessa vez a gente fez o oposto, né? Em vez de ser uma série baseada num livro, você escreveu o livro baseado na série da Shonda. Como foi fazer esse caminho inverso na criação da escrita?
It was such an interesting process because it really used a different part of the writing brain. It was the first time I'd ever written anything where I had source material, where I didn't have to kind of write the outline. Basically what happened was Shonda wrote 6 scripts and kind of handed them to me, and I had to figure out how to turn it into a book. So I think a lot of people thought Shonda and I were holed up in some room somewhere, but it wasn't that. We absolutely took turns. And it was a lot like a puzzle because I had to look at these scripts and sort of figure out, okay, I need this piece and that piece, but not that piece. And, I'm sort of moving things around, and it was just really interesting. And I thought it was fun. I'd love to do it again.
Adoro, gente, eu adoro. Eu adoraria fazer de novo. Fica a dica, Shonda, né? Queremos mais spin-off de Bridgerton, sim ou claro? Né? Sei lá, de repente Smith, né, gente? Rokesbys, né? Ai, eu amo que vocês amam as mesmas famílias que eu. Né? Estamos aqui esperando, né? Aliás, para quem ainda não sabe, para quem já viu a série Rainha Charlotte, levanta a mão. Quem já leu o livro Rainha Charlotte, levanta a mão. Para quem já viu, mas não leu, fica a dica. Como ela mesma disse, não tá tudo igual, tá? É aquele momento assim, adoramos a série, mas vamos saber mais, vamos mergulhar mais nessa história. Amo de paixão, não é pouco. Então, fica a dica de leitura para vocês.
If you read the book, then you get to find out what everybody was thinking.
Sim, gente, gostamos de diálogos internos, não é mesmo? Queremos saber mais, certo? Adoro. Em Rainha Charlotte, lidamos com questões como raça e amor entre personagens do mesmo gênero. Meu coração é todinho de Reynolds e Brimsley, gente. Amo. Gente, eu não vou nem dar spoiler para quem ainda não assistiu, mas a valsa. Coraçãozinho. Sim. Vou falar nada, que ela volta no parquinho para não contar spoiler para quem não assistiu. Essas temáticas são muito importantes, mas nem sempre fizeram parte de romances de época. Então, como foi para você escrever esse material e como você vê essa inclusão de temática e caracterização no gênero literário do romance de época?
So for me, it was wonderful to do something like this. One of the things that's very different about Queen Charlotte than the other books that I've written is that in the books that I've written alone, they're very tightly focused on two characters. I mean, there are lots of wonderful secondary characters, and I love my secondary characters, but it's really focused on the romance of the two main characters. And in fact, in almost none of my books will you ever find a scene that doesn't include one of the two main characters. So Queen Charlotte was different in that there were really four main characters that we were following in the book, which gave me the opportunity to explore a secondary love story in a way that I've never done before, which I think also gave me a really good way to write about a gay love story, which, you know, in the other books, if I had gay characters, they would be secondary characters, but I wouldn't necessarily show their love story. And it was very, very special for me to do that. And what I wanted to do most of all is just to show how universal it is, and the feelings of falling in love, and the, oh, does he really like me? I'm straight, and I've had those feelings of, oh, does he really like me? And you know what? A gay man has the same feelings. Oh, does he really like me? And so I wanted to show how things that are different are often just the same.
Palmas, pessoas! Amor é amor, pessoas, não é? Não é? Adoro. E você pensa em abordar esse tipo de história, esse tipo de questão também nos seus próximos livros?
I don't know. It really depends on what the next book is. Again, I'll probably be back to my regular type of book, which focuses tightly on one love story, which I would think would be a heterosexual love story, because that's really what I do best. But I may be looking for other ways to bring in other characters. But also, one thing that's important to me is that even if I don't include this type of story in my work, it's something that I want to work for in my life, for advocacy. And so that's why after I'm here in Brazil, I'm going to Florida, where I don't know if you all know, but they have some very bad laws there that are really harmful towards people who are not straight, who are gay, bi, lesbian. And so all the money that I'm earning from my talks in Florida, I'm donating to Equality Florida, which is the largest gay rights group in Florida. And it will come to $25,000 donated.
É rainha ou não é, pessoas? Maravilhosa.
So even if you don't see things in my books, I'm working for it in life.
Tem que fazer a diferença, né, gente? A gente tem que fazer a diferença. O romance de época, assim como inúmeros outros gêneros literários, tem mudado bastante. E bastante de um tempo para cá também. Quais outras mudanças você vê ou você espera que aconteça? Por exemplo, papo sobre consentimento, não é mesmo? Né? A gente tem os romances mais antigos que a gente fica assim, amada, foge que é cilada, isso é crime, né? E aí hoje, de vez em quando a gente passa um pano para o personagem, né? De vez em quando a gente faz uma faxina, não é nem só o pano, vai, volta, veja, né? Mas a gente precisa conversar um pouco sobre algumas mudanças. Então, dito isso, o que você espera, o que você tem visto que acontece, né, que tem acontecido de um tempo para cá, e o que você espera que ainda aconteça?
I think basically we're just going to see more of what has already started. I think that the romance genre is already moving in the directions that it needs to move in order to reflect society as it is, and society as it should be. And I honestly think romance was ahead of a lot of other things for that. And I just think we're just moving toward more diversity, toward more inclusion, toward more empowerment of women. I don't necessarily foresee something new, just more of the same, which is going very well. I do also think it's important, you know, it's easy to look back at some of the older books and say, oh, gosh, no. But it's also important to understand the times in which they were written. And one of the things that I like to point out is that, you know, the very first true romance novel of modern times, it's considered to be The Flame and the Flower by Kathleen Woodward. And when you read it now, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a total rape fantasy. This is not okay. But if you think about it, in 1972, when that book came out, authors weren't allowed to show women's pleasure on the page at all. And the only way she could get it there was to have it in some way being like, well, I didn't really want it, but I was overcome, and now I can enjoy it. And it was actually revolutionary to show women's pleasure in any way. So even though that's not how I would write something now, and it's not something I approve of, I have to still honor her in starting something the only way that society would let her do at the time.
Palmas, pessoas. Vocês vão ouvir muito eu falando isso, né? Palmas, pessoas. Mas concordo, eu acho que é uma coisa... Isso é uma dica para vocês também, galera. Quando vocês compram qualquer livro, tá? Não só de romance. Quando você abre a página, tem ali o livro, a data da tradução e a data de publicação original. Isso é super importante para a gente entender qual é a cabeça daquele autor na época que aquilo foi escrito, o que era considerado ok e como isso mudou. Né? Porque a gente, às vezes, pensa exatamente nisso. Tipo, vamos cancelar o que aconteceu. Tipo, não. Vamos entender o porquê aconteceu e vamos andar adiante. Vamos, né? Isso funciona, isso não mais. Vamos continuar progredindo. Então, fica a dica. Eu acho que tem muito a ver com o que a Julia falou aqui hoje pra gente. Obrigada, gente. Vocês são muito gentis. Um dos temas atuais de debates dessa Bienal, que completa 40 anos, é a inteligência artificial. E muito tem se debatido... Ai, desculpa, ficou alto. E muito tem se debatido online sobre o famigerado o ChatGPT. E como é para tomar para si, usando o ChatGPT, a escrita dos outros, né? O que você acha sobre isso?
I think I haven't done enough research. I'll be honest. I think I'm scared to do the research because I'm scared of what I'll find. I mean, right now, it's hard for me to imagine artificial intelligence writing a novel that is really good. I mean, I feel like it could definitely write a novel, but to me, when I read a book, what matters the most is the author's voice. And sometimes I'll read a book and I'll finish it because I'm enjoying it, but nothing makes me go out and get another book by the author. And I think to myself, what's the difference in my reading experience when sometimes you finish a book and you think, I have to go get another book by that author. And sometimes you read a book and you liked it, and that's it. And I think the difference is the author's voice. And I don't know if AI can do that yet. I don't know. I can tell you that, this is something, I don't know whether you guys are all following what's happening in Hollywood right now with the strikes, but AI is a big, big part of the strikes and the disagreements that the actors and the writers are having with the studios. And I'm very glad and grateful that they are putting this out on the table now and getting things out now because, once you let something go, you kind of can't take it back. So if they once they let them say, oh yeah, you can do this with AI, you can't grab it back. So I'm very grateful for them for fighting the war that I don't have to just yet.
Perfeito. Arrasou, pessoas. Tecnologia é legal, mas o que tem a gente? Coração, sentimento, emoção, né? Então, realmente, por favor, não deixem a tecnologia fazer o trabalho de vocês. Por favor. Gente, vamos falar de quê? TikTok. TikTok e outras... Pessoal aqui, TikTokers. TikTok e outras redes sociais têm sido uma força potente para alavancar interesse de leitores em vários livros, gêneros literários e autores. Como você vê a relação entre a rede social e o romance de época?
So, when I first started reading historical romance, or I guess the period in time when I was first writing, so this was like 1992. Yes, I'm that old. I had no one to talk to about the books that I loved. I had no way to find out about the books that I loved. The only thing I had was we had these bookstore chains in the United States where every other month they would publish like a little pamphlet that listed a bunch of books that were coming out. And this was all I had. This was the only way I ever heard about any books. And now there's so many ways for readers to find out about books. And through social media, and especially Book Talk now, I mean, you can find people who love the same books you love. And, talk to them and hear about them and not just, put some words on paper about it, but show how excited you are. And I love that this entire, society is growing up around the love of books. And in the United States at least, I know that book sales are up, which nobody expected. Everyone thought, oh, what generation are they? Generation Z? I don't even know. Like, Generation Z's on their phones, they're not going to read. And it's like, nope, they're reading. They're using their phones to tell everybody about how much they're reading, but they're reading. And I think it's amazing. But I'm not on TikTok because I would be so cringe.
Maravilhosa.
So you guys can all make TikToks about my books.
Ela deu aval, gente, tá? Pronto, fanfic virou canon agora. Adoro. A minha última pergunta, e agora eu vou fazer as perguntas que vocês botaram aqui, tá? A minha última pergunta é a seguinte. Eu botei nas minhas redes sociais uma caixinha fazendo assim, o que vocês querem saber da Julia Quinn, né? Tipo, ela vem, vamos perguntar coisa para ela. E aí a pergunta que ganhou, assim, tirando, né, a terceira temporada, que a gente já tentou passar aqui, a outra pergunta foi assim, que todo mundo queria saber, você está pensando já em escrever algo novo, sabe? Porque a gente já está igual a ela, assim, nossa, eu acabei de ler um livro, eu quero ler mais, né? E a gente está assim, e aí, Júlia? Queremos. Então, e aí, como estão os seus próximos projetos?
I'm thinking. You know, I feel like, especially now after the television show, you know, expectations are higher. And I have ideas about the characters I want to write about, but I feel like I've got to get the right story for them. And it's just not coming to me yet. And, you know, then the Queen Charlotte book opportunity came along. So I was like, okay, we'll do that. So I'm thinking, I promise, but I don't want to put a book out unless it's good. And so it's going to be a little bit longer. I'm sorry.
A gente espera, né, gente? A gente espera. Palmas, pessoas! Então, vamos lá. Eu tenho aqui uma pergunta super descrita da Natália Rocha. Cadê a Natália? Natália! Você já mudou o final de algum livro porque você achou que ele não estava casando com a história? Se sim, qual livro? Porque a gente quer respostas, né, Natália? É isso.
Do you mean like while I was writing it, or?
After, like, you were writing the book, and then it was like, this ending is not really what I want to, I'm going to change it.
No, I haven't really changed an ending. Usually by the time I get to the ending, I have a pretty good idea of where of everything's going. I'm much more likely to make changes toward the beginning when I'm figuring things out. And probably the biggest one was It's in His Kiss changed quite a bit at the beginning. But I ended up actually saving what didn't work out for It's in His Kiss, and it turned into the other Miss Bridgerton. Like a dozen years later. So don't throw out anything that you put aside.
Perfeito, gente. Para quem, eu não sei se pegaram o nome, It's in His Kiss it's Francesca's book, right? Não, It's in His Hyacinth. É o da Hyacinth, então mudou e aí transformou num pedacinho para o The other Miss Bridgerton is the second one, or it's the third. It's the Andrew. It's Poppy and Andrew. E aí se transformou num cavaleiro a bordo. Então, uma parte que não entrou no livro da Hyacinth se transformou em um cavaleiro a bordo. E foi para os Rokesbys. Então, agradecemos muito, gente. Obrigada. Essa aqui é da Natara Papagianni. Natara, falei certo o seu nome, Natara? Tá certinho? Ótimo. Há alguma história, algum livro que você agora, em 2023, gostaria de mudar? Se sim, qual e por qual motivo? Se não, por quê?
I don't think I would change anything. I mean, I write the best book I can when I'm writing it, and it stays put. And I mean, maybe I'd go back to my first book and clean it up a little bit because I'm a better writer now. But, you know, I do stand by what I've done. My characters don't always do the right thing. But I think we also need to put everything in perspective of the time that they lived in as well. And it's not just that some things are acceptable then that aren't now. It's not so much that, but you just have to understand the different social construct. So, you know, for example, a lot of people want to know about the situation with Simon and Daphne. That's probably what you were asking about. And I think the thing well, let me back up. A lot of people will say something like, well, if we reversed their roles, look at it that way. And I'm like, well, you can't reverse their roles. Because at that time, the men had all the power. All the power. The power differential was huge. So her behavior toward him could never be the same as his behavior toward her because he basically owned her.
he could say, you have to go live your life in France and never see your family again, and she would not be able to do a thing. She couldn't divorce him. And, there's also the question of, well, she behaved in a way that he didn't consent to. But I also think he behaved in a way that she didn't consent to. And so they both did bad things. But they learned and they grew. And life is sometimes messy. And romance novels can sometimes be messy. And I guess there is one thing I would change in that book. I would have taken out alcohol. He had too much to drink, and that I would take out. But the rest of the story, no, I think that's part of the story. It's not pretty, but not everything is pretty.
Maravilhosa. Gostou? Maravilhosa, pessoas. Eu adoro treta familiar que a gente discute aqui como fosse assim, ele errou, mas ela também, como se eles fossem reais, né? Eu adoro, é personagem fictício, mas se fez a gente se apaixonar, se fez a gente se revoltar, é real. E só a nossa opinião importa, né? Tá certo, adoro. Temos aqui a Karen. A Karen é igual a Beyoncé, ela não tem sobrenome. Então é a Karen, se tem... Eu vou ler a pergunta, se for você, dá um grito aí pra gente olhar quem é você, tá? Karen, Julia Quinn, seus livros fizeram eu me apaixonar por romances de época. Gostaria de que você compartilhasse quais inspirações para o gênero romance de época. O que a inspirou, Júlia? Cadê a Karen? Tá por aí? Não, Karen, cadê? Aê, Karen tá ali, lá atrás.
I think my inspirations are just other great books and authors. So I'm happy to recommend a whole bunch to you, many of whom are published here in Brazil. When I first started writing, I was reading a lot of Lisa Kleypas.
Uma salva de palmas para Lisa Kleypas, gente.
Julie Garwood, who sadly just passed away. Judith McNaught, Amanda Quick. Nowadays, there's more who I really love. Tessa Dare's a new one who's here. She's really great. I think Courtney Milan is coming soon.
She's here. We already have her.
Yeah, we already have her. Great. Beverly Jenkins is fabulous. There's an author I keep telling them to publish, Julianne Long, who's wonderful. So if you read in English, get Julianne Long. I don't think she's in Portuguese. Other really great authors. Oh, there's a new one. Again, I don't think she's in Portuguese. Martha Waters is a brand new author I love. Suzanne Enoch, I think, is here. Give me a minute. I'm like, who's in Portuguese?
A lot of them are.
Yeah. Oh, this is the worst because I'm forgetting someone. I'm like, Evie Dunmore. Is she in Portuguese?
I think she's in the process of being.
Okay, she's great.
Palmas, pessoas! A gente está na Bienal, tá? Então já aumentou a listinha de livros agora. Vocês anotem, entendeu? Saindo daqui, se autografa com a Júlia e já chega nos estandes. É isso. Ó, a Emanuele Carla, que Emanuele está aqui, maravilhosa. Você teve alguma inspiração para criar uma história de uma família tão amável e companheira? Da onde surgiu a inspiração para os Bridgertons, né? Da onde surgiu a inspiração para a família dos Bridgertons? Foi real?
Before I answer that, I just wanted to say that if you follow me on Facebook, every week I recommend a historical romance novel. So there's that, so you can get that there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. But to answer this question, I'll be honest, I don't remember a lot, because I figured out that The Duke and I is the first book, and I would have written that in 1998, because it came out in January 2000. So that was a very long time ago. I was still in my 20s. But here's what I think happened. I actually had the character of Simon first. And what happened was I had met somebody who was a student at medical school with my husband. And he had a very, very severe stutter. And it just made me think about what it must be like to have that much difficulty communicating, because I'm a very chatty person. And I just started thinking about it. And this particular person, he had not overcome his stutter the way Simon eventually did. You know, he still had this very strong stutter, but he was obviously achieving a lot. I mean, he was at medical school. He was going to become a doctor, which is incredible. In the United States, there are actually, I think, 3 times as many people who apply to medical school who get positions. So it's hard. And I just started doing research on stuttering and about it. So I came up with this idea of like, okay, well, what would it be like then when we didn't know as much as we know now about speech difficulties? And then, of course, it's like, oh, and what if like your father hated you because of it? Because I'm writing, you know, romance novels, and I have to bring the drama. And so, you know, I created this character who had this terrible, terrible childhood. So naturally, I was like, well, he has to fall in love with somebody who's got the exact opposite experience. She just has to have the best family ever. And I don't remember why I gave them 8 kids, I don't even remember why I put their names in alphabetical order or anything like that, but I just wanted it to be this big, happy family. And, but of course they had their trauma too, with their father having passed away. But still, you know, I think they are this example of how you can have a life where terrible things have happened to you and in your life, but it can still be a life full of joy.
Ainda acho que nessa temática de personagens, a Teresa Neves. Cadê a Teresa Neves? Aê, Teresa Neves, lá do outro lado. Ela quer saber qual foi o personagem mais complexo que você já construiu e por quê? Yeah, the harder to write or more complex character.
Oh, that's a hard one. What do you think is the most complex character?
Simon, gente. Anthony.
Okay, I'll answer that one then. So, because I know that answer. Anthony came about because, you know, my father-in-law actually, his father died quite young. His father had had rheumatic fever as a child, and which led to a heart problem. And he was one of the very first people in the world to get open heart surgery. This was in the late 1950s, and he died on the operating table. And my father-in-law was, gosh, I don't even know if he was 20, or maybe his early 20s. And I can't remember how old his father was, but he just had it in his head that he would die at that age, that, you know, how could you live longer than your parent had? And I thought this was so fascinating. I'd never heard of this sort of thing. And I was talking to my aunt, who's a psychologist, and she said it's actually very common among people who lose their parents when they're young. And I've heard from a lot of readers who said that they've had the same experience. And so I thought, well, how could this affect you if you just have this hanging over your head that you're sure you're going to die young? And so that's how I came up with Anthony. I'm happy to say that my father-in-law is still alive. He is 83, maybe. And actually, my husband and daughter are with him right now. They're in New York with him. And he went on to do really incredible things with his life. Actually, after he thought he was going to die, he was the Assistant Attorney General of the United States in charge of civil rights. So, yeah, he did a lot of cool things. Yeah. So I think Anthony gets to do a lot of cool things too.
Fãs de Anthony, gente, façam barulho, pessoal.
And for those of you who are Anthony fans, I need to tell you that Jonathan Bailey is just the most delightful human being. He is so nice and so funny and so kind to everyone, and just absolutely lovely. And I don't know if you know, he won an Olivier Award for his role in Company on the West End. So he can sing, too.
Gente, é maravilhoso e canta. Como assim? Perfeito. A Sara Zinato. Sara aqui na frente. Júlia, por que romances de época? Por que exatamente esse gênero que você escolheu escrever?
I started writing historical romance because I like to read historical romance. It's really as simple as that. I think, it's sort of the same thing. Why did you become a writer? Well, I was a reader first. Not every reader becomes a writer, but I think every writer was and is a reader. And I just loved reading them. And, you always hear these stories of people who say, I was reading these books and I thought I could do better. And that's not what happened to me. I found books that were amazing. And I thought, I want more of this. I want to join these people. I want to write amazing books like these other writers. And, what I was reading at the time were historical romance novels. And it turned out that they are just a very good fit for my particular skills as a writer. The Regency has a lot. I think a lot of what people love about it is this sort of art of conversation, and I'm best at dialogue. I'm not great at description, which actually is really good if you get your books adapted, because it leaves a lot of room for the screenwriters to make their own world, because I haven't described everything. They get to do it. And so when people say, oh, did your characters look like you described them, or did you saw them? I'm like, well, I didn't have a really good picture of them anyway, so sure.
Vocês são maravilhosos, gente. Obrigada por esse carinho incrível com ela. Eu tenho mais uma perguntinha aqui, e aí eu vou fazer uma final, e aí eu tenho uma coisa para contar para vocês. A Marina Leonel, cadê a Marina? Marina, aqui atrás. Ela queria saber como foi, assim, rapidamente, o processo de publicação do seu primeiro livro, no sentido de você enfrentou dificuldades e como você fez para superar essas dificuldades. Porque a gente tem aqui muitas pessoas que também escrevem, né? Pessoas, a gente quer saber. Eu escrevo, adoro.
So the first thing to understand is that when I published my first book, things were very, very different than they are now. So people sometimes come up to me to say, they ask me this question because they were like, can you give me advice for now? And I say, I'm the wrong person to ask because I don't know anything about getting a book published now. I mean, when I published my first book, I didn't even have an email address. Seriously, I had to, print everything out, and you would send it to New York with a self-addressed stamped envelope so they could send it back to you. And when I published then, there was there was self-publishing, but it was really for people who couldn't hack it another way, and we made fun of them. I mean, we were like, oh. And now self-publishing is amazing. Some of the people who are self-publishing, they're doing so well. So it's very, very different, but I'm happy to share my story. I'm afraid I got my first agent the old-fashioned way, which is nepotism. Remember my father-in-law, the one who thought he was going to die young? When I was trying to write my first book, he happened to be dating the most powerful woman in publishing. And so she called her friend and said, who was an agent, and said, would you look at this book? And her friend, the agent, said, well, I'm not taking on new people. And by the way, her friend, the agent, was Nora Roberts' agent. So yeah. And she said, but there's somebody else at my publishing house who is. And so I sent it to her. And there were still some hiccups along the way. Somebody there accidentally told me no. We said no. So I started sending it to other people and getting rejections. And then she called and said, we want to represent you. And I said, I thought you already rejected me. But then once I had signed with an agent, we started sending it out to publishing houses, and I got a lot of rejections, actually. And then at the very end, I got lucky enough that maybe there were 2 people in New York who actually wanted to publish my book, and we found them at the same time, which meant that there was a little bit of an auction. So I got a little bit more money than perhaps I would have, which was really nice. And that was really my story. But nowadays, it's very, very different. So if you are hoping to make a career in writing, the best thing you could do is to talk to writers who have had their first book published more recently, because they could actually tell you things that would be useful. Nothing in my experience is useful today, I'm afraid.
Palmas, pessoas! Para finalizar, eu queria só que ela compartilhasse com vocês uma coisa que está acontecendo nos Estados Unidos, que está rolando lá uma questão muito grande sobre censura de livro em bibliotecas, tá? Em bibliotecas públicas, que infelizmente a gente não tem tantas aqui, tanto acesso a várias bibliotecas públicas como lá tem. Mas está acontecendo uma questão muito grande sobre censura lá. E a gente está aqui numa Bienal maravilhosa, em que a gente pode escolher o que a gente quer ler, o quanto a gente quer ler, o quanto a gente quer compartilhar com outras pessoas. E eu queria que ela falasse um pouquinho sobre essa experiência dos Estados Unidos, o que está passando lá, e para a gente valorizar a nossa aqui e realmente abraçar a importância da leitura.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous and terrible thing that's happening in the United States, and it's hard for me to believe that we haven't learned from the past. There's just a lot of cases where, and it's often a state-by-state or town-by-town thing, but where, one person can go to the library with a list of books that they find objectionable, and the library has to remove them all until they can review them. And the librarians are overworked and underpaid, and it could take months and months to review all these books. So they're effectively banned. And I just don't think that one person has the right, especially one person who has no training in library science, who is not an educator, who doesn't know what is appropriate for certain ages. They don't get to decide that nobody gets to read these books, maybe because these characters are too black. And maybe my white child might feel guilty, And the thing is that, sorry, I get so upset about this, I don't even have words. But nobody has the right to decide what you're allowed to read. And you know what? If you're a parent and there are some things that you don't want your child to read, that's fine. But you don't get to decide what my kid reads. And you don't get to decide what your kid reads or your kid reads. You don't get to decide for the entire school system. If you want to, you go to school, you get a master's in library science and get a job doing that. But you don't get to decide for everybody else. And yeah, sorry, you can see I get very angry about it. And I really hope that this doesn't happen in Brazil. I can't believe it's happening in the United States. We ought to know better. But I guess we don't. I guess people don't remember all the book burning, in Nazi Germany. People don't remember. Yeah. It's terrible.
A gente passou por uma situação assim há um tempo atrás, né, gente, de tentarem censurar o que a gente queria ler e a gente foi contra. Então, assim, fica aqui a palavra de uma pessoa que escreve há muitos anos, arrasa, tem o coração de todos nós. E a gente está dentro de uma Bienal do livro que está completando 40 anos. Então, assim, diversidade de leitura, de temática, de vontade de ler é importante, é o nosso direito, não é um privilégio, é um direito e a gente tem que ter. Então, assim, lutemos sempre por isso, tá? Não nos calemos nunca por isso. É um painel de romance de época e a gente está aqui assim, lê tudo, galera! É isso. Bom, gente, não saiam porque a gente vai fazer aqui uma coisa que ela não está sabendo, olha só. Eu acabei de falar assim um pouquinho, né? Ela vai olhar para minha cara do tipo, como assim? É o seguinte, gente, faz 10 anos que a editora Arqueiro começou a publicar romances de época aqui no Brasil. E a gente começou assim com um projeto muito forte trazendo algumas autoras assim, do tipo, vamos trazer romance de época para a galera, né, com muito carinho, com muito cuidado, com edições bonitas. E a Júlia foi uma das autoras que estava nessa primeira leva e que segue com a gente, né, depois de 10 anos de publicação. E ela já bateu, por causa de vocês, 3 milhões de livros vendidos no Brasil. E agora, com essa vinda dela aqui na Bienal, a gente queria... A pessoa que é responsável por isso é a minha chefe maravilhosa. Não é puxa-saquismo, gente. Ela é maravilhosa mesmo. Chamada Nana Vaz de Castro. Ela que pegou e falou assim, vou trazer, eu acho ela maravilhosa. E eu queria chamar a Nana aqui, porque a gente tem uma homenagem para a Júlia por 3 milhões de livros vendidos. Palmas, pessoas!
Obrigada!
Ela não fazia ideia, gente. A gente está aqui assim, como assim? Aí ela... E, mais uma vez, se ela chegou a 3 milhões de livros vendidos, foi porque vocês pegaram um livro, olharam a sinopse e falaram assim, acho que eu vou gostar disso aqui. E aí vocês gostaram do primeiro, depois do segundo, aí vocês falaram com pessoas e foram e compraram o terceiro. Então, obrigada por investirem não só a grana, que a gente sabe que é suado, todo mundo paga boleto, nos livros, mas obrigada por vocês terem investido o tempo de vocês, o carinho, o coração de vocês nesses personagens criados por elas. Então, parabéns para vocês também, pessoas. Gente, a gente vai levar agora a fotinho aqui. Peraí, calma, pessoas.
Gente, queria dizer que é super emocionante entrar aqui, ver vocês todos e sentir esse amor todo que vem de vocês. Então, obrigada por lerem esses livros todos nesses últimos 10 anos, por falarem sobre eles, por postarem e, principalmente, obrigada por serem fontes inesgotáveis de amor, que é o que vocês são.